Hi guys, so I have been working really hard on getting a big order of new books out in the library ready for you guys to check out. If you are a 7th or 8th grader, you know that in years past I have made what I call book look videos, and in these videos I like to highlight our new books and show you the covers, tell you the author's name, and maybe give you just a little bit of information about them so that you can decide if they sound good and if you would like to check them out or not. So I went through the boxes of books this afternoon and I tried to kind of genreify them or categorize them by type. That's what genreifying is. And I thought that for this first video I would start with scary books since it is October and it's almost Halloween, and it's always a huge request for scary books in the library, so I'm going to show you guys some new ones that we have. So the first one that I'm going to talk about here for a minute is titled Scream Sight, and it is by Justina Ireland. So here's what it looks like. And in the book Scream Sight, the main character is a teenage girl named Sabrina, and she wants to grow up to be an investigative reporter. And for her first story, she is going to investigate a website called Scream Sight. The school day is officially over. So she is going to investigate a website called Scream Sight, and on Scream Sight, users submit scary videos, and the goal is to get the most screams or the most votes that makes your video the scariest. So as she is kind of finding out more about Scream Sight and she's watching some of these submitted videos, she starts thinking to herself that some of these videos look real, which means some of these horrific things and events could be really happening. And as she kind of starts to investigate the truth behind Scream Sight, you know, some bad things start to happen and it starts to affect her life and she gets sucked into it as well. So I thought this one sounded so good. It kind of reminded me of Welcome to the Dark House, which is a 2-book series that gets checked out a lot here in the library. So if that sounds interesting to you, that is Scream Sight. The next book I'm going to talk about is called The Agony House, and this is by Cherie Priest. This is the same author of I Am Princess X, which we got a couple years ago. So in this book, and this book takes place post Hurricane Katrina. The main character is a young teen and her name is Denise, and her family has purchased kind of a rundown house in New Orleans, and her family is wanting to fix it up and turn it into a bed and breakfast eventually. And when the family moves in, she starts to kind of just notice some odd, creepy instances, you know, unexplained noises, things like that. And so she kind of starts investigating in the house, and she finds this old comic book up in the attic from like the 1950s. And as she kind of starts reading through that comic book, she's able to start like piecing together some things about the house and why these weird things might be happening. And Cherie Priest does some illustrations, so I'm just going to give you an example. So there are lots of pages in here with kind of like comic style blurbs on them, but it's definitely not a graphic novel. This is still a text heavy book, but you can kind of see there where the shaded pages are. So there are some illustrations in it, and that is The Agony House. Next up, I'm going to talk about the book Long Lincoln, and this is by Lindsay Baraclough. Long Lincoln, it's a pretty thick book, so you definitely want to make sure you're in it for the long haul whenever you check this out. Long Lincoln is almost like an urban legend in this small town, this small village, I guess I should say. And when I kind of read the book jacket or the blurb for this book, it reminded me a little bit of that Slender Man that came out a few years ago, and it was like really scary. So Long Lincoln is this urban legend, and there's Cora and her younger sister are the main characters, Cora and Mimi, and they get sent to live with their older aunt in this isolated, very small village. And whenever they get there, they kind of start to realize their aunt is a little eccentric and a little odd, and they get very homesick. What they don't know is that their aunt is odd for a reason. She kind of had like a devastating past history with some other children that had come to stay with her for a while. And so Cora is trying to kind of uncover what's happened to her aunt, what's happened in the village. And it's pretty good. It's been described as a page turner. So if you're interested in that one is Long Lincoln. Next, I have 2 books by the same author. The author is Lois Ruby. The first book is called The Secret Grave, and the second book is The Doll Graveyard. I will say that if you like Mary Downing Hahn, you would probably like these books. The story behind The Secret Grave actually reminds me a lot of Wait Till Helen Comes by Mary Downing Hahn. And then The Doll Graveyard kind of reminds me of The Doll in the Garden by Mary Downing Hahn. So I think if you like Mary Downing Hahn, there's a good chance that you would like either one of these, and I'm not going to go into them too much more than that. Let's see, the next one I want to show you is called Famous Last Words, and this is by Katie Allender. This book has been out for a couple years. I know it was on a book fair a couple years ago. Katie Allender writes some other ghosty, scary stories. She has the Bad Girls Don't Die trilogy. She has also written Dead Girls of Hysteria Hall. She also wrote Marie Antoinette's Serial Killer. So she kind of tends to like to write, with a little bit of the horror genre mixed in with like realistic fiction. In Famous Last Words, the main character ends up moving to like the Hollywood, Los Angeles area, and she starts seeing some scary happenings around Los Angeles, and coincidentally a murder is on the loose. So it's going to tie kind of like a lot of like the Hollywood, big screen cinema, movie style type lifestyle into this book, but obviously some ghosts and murder and scary scenes. So if you're interested in that, this book is Famous Last Words. Up next, we have The Cemetery Boys by Heather Brewer. So Heather Brewer has written the Vladimir Todd series, which I know I have some 7th and 8th graders that are reading that series right now. However, Cemetery Boys is not part of a series right now. It's just a standalone book, so that's different from kind of what we're used to in our library. In Cemetery Boys, the main character moves to a nowhere little town in Michigan with his dad, and he doesn't like it. He does befriend a set of twins, one boy and one girl twin, Kara and Devin, and he sometimes feels like he gets in the middle of their twin relationship and like he gets forced to pick sides. As he gets to know them better, he starts to hang out in the cemetery with them and a group of their friends, and as they're hanging out in the cemetery, they're starting to learn a lot about the town's kind of like dark beginning or dark past. So if you are interested in that, that is The Cemetery Boys by Heather Brewer. The next one I'm going to talk about is Pan's Labyrinth, and this is kind of a work between a filmmaker and a writer. So Guillermo del Toro and Cornelia Funk came together to write this. Pan's Labyrinth is going to be a really good mix of fantasy and horror. It's very, very unique. There's going to be things like, let me look at my notes here. Okay, so there's going to be things like trickster creatures, child-eating monsters, a princess. Okay, so if you kind of like more fantasy style books, then you would probably be interested in Pan's Labyrinth. It's definitely something different. Next, we have an author that we all know, hopefully, and that is R.L. Stine. So, R.L. Stine has a few different age-targeted, like series-appropriate books is kind of how I would describe it. Obviously, Goosebumps are very popular, and I would say Goosebumps are probably better for our 6th graders, or maybe just for like a quick read. You know, it shouldn't take you a whole month to read a Goosebumps book, and they're scary, but they're kind of like corny, cheesy scary, not, you know, terrified to go to bed at night scary. He also has the Fear Street series, which is aimed a little more for like the upper middle grades, like 7th and 8th graders and even high school. And in those, the characters are a little bit older, and the storylines do get a little more dark, or, you know, more suspenseful. So he's trying to kind of like revive that, the Fear Street series. And so this is actually a series and its return to Fear Street. And this is book 1, You May Now Kill the Bride. There are a couple of other books, but they are actually on back order, so they sent me book 1 now, and I'm hoping I'll get the rest here soon. But I think if you like scary stories, if you're familiar with R.L. Stine and you like the way he writes, but maybe you're kind of wanting something a little bit more from him, or even just something newer from him, because the original Fear Street books were around when I was in middle school, so those are old. So you should definitely try his return to Fear Street. Also, from R.L. Stine, we have a book just called Beware. And this is actually a story collection book, which means it has several different short stories inside of it. So it's not one story, it's several. So if you've read the Spooky Stories by Alan Schwartz, then you're kind of, you know, familiar with the idea of there being multiple stories in a book. So if we kind of look at the table of contents here, you know, you can tell there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it looks like 10 different stories. Just kind of looking at the page numbers, it looks like each one is maybe roughly 10 to a dozen pages long. So maybe for those of you that have a hard time with follow through and sticking with the whole book, you know, from beginning to end, this would be something good for you to try, because each story is somewhat short and then it's over, and then you get to try something else. And if you get scared really easily, then this might be a good beginner scary book for you, because hopefully, you know, you can't get too detailed and too crazy with your story whenever you're kind of limited to, you know, 12 pages. So this is Beware by R.L. Stine. And I have 2 other scary books that are collections of scary stories. So the other one I have is Ask the Bones, Scary Stories from Around the World. So this has a collection of